Thanks for tuning in to Interactive Indies, a bi-weekly community podcast featuring the stories from the people that make up our interactive game development and other creative communities in Winnipeg and across Canada as well. If this is your first time listening, you can now watch the podcast on YouTube in iPhone quality video.
It's pretty high quality.
Right? As well, you can also catch the audio, if that's more your thing, on pretty much every major streaming platform. If you just go to interactiveindie.com, that will kind of give you links to all the various platforms that we're on. But to cut what's that expression?
Cut to the chase?
To cut to the chase. There we go. You know, there's a nice segue there. I have a special guest with me. I was looking forward to talking to you, Brett.
Yes.
Because I've been familiar with some of your, or a lot of your work that you've done over the years. I think you're someone that has been kind of disciplined and plugging away at your craft. So as we kind of jump, because I have a lot of questions, but before we jump into it, I was hoping that you could give people from your own words a little bit more about like who you are.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Brett Lowey, and I'm a game developer here in Winnipeg, and I've been working since 2015, I believe. I started a company called BrainGoodGames. I'm a solo independent game developer, and basically the idea of the company is to make single player strategy games that are infinitely replayable. And I started it because I sort of got into the designer board game scene around that time, and really liked a lot of those board games. But between game nights, it would have been nice for there to be a game that I could play on my own. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't anything like that I could find, so I decided to make them.
Cool. So, I mean, there's so many different tangents I want to go on, so maybe we'll start with your company, and maybe what led to that point. Did you always know that that's what you wanted to do, is to create a company? And
yeah, so when I was a kid, like really early, I kind of knew that I wanted to make games. Like I got a Super Nintendo for Christmas when I was, I don't know, 7 or something like that, with Super Mario World, mm-hmm. and was totally hooked on it, and still love that game. So I sort of used to always doodle in my binders at school or whatever and draw out levels of like Donkey Kong or Super Mario or whatever. And sort of in the back of my mind thought that maybe someday I'd be able to make games, but didn't know how that would ever happen. So it wasn't really like a practical dream. It was just like that could maybe happen someday and that would be cool. Mm. So then fast forward to high school, I guess, and I took some computer science courses in high school and really liked it. And I think I ended up making a small game in one of those courses as like an extra work type of thing anyway. Yeah. But still, like, I was sort of segueing out of the video game making thing mentally. And
why was that?
I think I was just trying to be practical about like getting hired and getting a job, and I didn't know of a lot of opportunities to do that straight out of school. Especially here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, there's more opportunities now, but
yes,
during the time when you were at that point,
like in high school and stuff, not really.
It's probably like complex and
that might have been
what else.
Yeah, that might have been it. But so anyway, but I really liked making things and coding and doing computer science. So I sort of, at that point, started thinking that maybe I would do something with that. And then in first year university, I took some electrical engineering courses, mm-hmm. and like totally bombed out of that. I was not good at that at all. I'm like definitely like not hardware minded, or however, whatever skills you need. Right. And also I just didn't find it. Like I was taking I remember distinctly taking like a statics class in first year engineering, and we were calculating the different forces on a bridge, like a suspension bridge or something, and I just like could not find what was interesting about that. So very quickly realized that wasn't going to work, and got back into computer science, and did computer science at U of M, and sort of thinking that maybe I'd get like a web development job,
Right.
because it was sort of like designing a web page is sort of vaguely interactive, or it is interactive, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so it's something that was like sort of tangentially related to games in a way. Like at least you're making a product that people are using, like consumers. So you have to do things about UI design and usability and making it fun to use and this kind of thing, which has always been more what I'm interested in, like where software interfaces with people rather than like something that's always really bored me is like getting deep into databases or networking code or whatever, nuts and bolts type stuff.
Not your thing.
Right. So I vastly prefer the front-facing side of things and designing experiences and that sort of thing. So it's like, well, maybe I'll do web development. Like that's sort of like games-ish. So yeah, out of university, I got a job doing that and did that for about a year. And I was totally miserable.
No.
Yeah. So that didn't go very well, and but it was weird. I got a message on LinkedIn from Corey King, actually.
Yeah, Corey King, yeah.
And he said that there was he looked at, I think I listed on LinkedIn that I was interested in making games, just as a total...
Just a throwaway comment kind of thing?
Yeah. But he messaged me and said that he was putting together this team to work on an application at his company, Zenfry.
Okay.
And I did an interview with them, and around the same time I did an interview at Complex as well. Right. And but I got the job at Zenfry and worked there for a year and a half.
Did all that just kind of develop like through that LinkedIn kind of connection, just kind of out of the blue?
It was totally, it was weird. Like I wasn't looking for it at all.
Right. Or not actively looking for it?
No, yeah, exactly. Like I distinctly remember that I didn't think that the comment on LinkedIn was going to lead to anything.
Oh, that's funny.
I just put it there, not even hopefully, but just like as like it's good to have lines in the water or whatever. Right. Like not to close doors you don't have to close, that kind of thing. Right. So so I ended up taking the position there at Zenfry and worked there for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And it was incredible because I got to get paid learning how to use Unity and make video games.
Isn't that like kind of crazy? It's funny how like some of these things that we dream of doing when we're younger, as we grow up, we realize it's maybe not that it's unattainable, but it's you have to like balance your what's maybe realistic. Yeah. So the fact that we get these opportunities that come to us that we didn't expect is just like so surreal. I don't know.
It was totally mind-blowing to me, and so I was learning how to make games practically, and I was doing like front-end game system programming, and that's like exactly what I wanted to be doing. And it was a small company, which I also like. And the other perk there is that one of my coworkers there, Mark Smith, had just released a game on Steam, and this was back previously in the ye old days of Steam when there weren't that many games on there. So to get on there, first you had to do a the green light process and get like a whole bunch of votes from the community or whoever you could wrangle to vote for your game. And you had to get like a ton of votes. Like, so he had kind of been through the gauntlet of getting a game released on Steam. Yeah. Like just getting a game on Steam at that point was an accomplishment in and of itself.
Okay. Even though that there wasn't a lot of games on there?
Exactly. That's why. It's like, because it was such a small funnel, right? So like to get on there, you had to
I see.
Really have a ton of votes on Greenlight because they were only letting very few in.
Okay.
So he had just done that though, and he just released the game on Steam, and he'd done it in Unity. Or that's not true actually. I think he was doing a port of his game to Unity. But so the great thing about that is I could pick his brain about the release process and getting published in Steam and what the greenlight process was like and what I would have to do. And it's in much the same way that when I got the opportunity at Zenfry, it sort of became real to me.
In what sense?
So when I got the opportunity at ZenFry, making video games professionally became real.
Right.
And then when I was talking to Mark, maybe releasing my own game sort of became something that could be real.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's like these little things are leading to like to a path.
Yeah. Sort of like I was very fortunate, but yeah, like I don't know. So yeah, exactly. It was like, well, maybe like he's just done this on Steam, and so maybe I could do something like that myself. Mm-hmm. And now I know, like I've learned all these things about how to make a game in Unity and blah blah blah. Like I think I could do it technically, and I think I know at least part of the publishing part of it, and like maybe I could actually make this happen.
That wasn't such a big leap that it felt like it was unrealistic. Like, so based on what your journey was up to that point, you had learned enough things to get yourself to a certain point, but that seems like a bit of a leap to go from working in the safety of like maybe or safety or whatever, how you want to phrase it, of a studio, to doing your own thing. Totally. You have to do the publishing, the marketing, the programming, the everything.
Yes. Well, part of what I liked about working at a small company, and ZenFry was pretty small at the time, is that you sort of have to wear a lot of different hats, even though you're at a company working for somebody else. So, like, there's only so many people there, right? So if you, like, we were talking about this earlier actually, but if you can do something, you're going to probably end up doing it at the company, just because there's only so many people to do any given thing, right? And so it's kind of, and I really like that kind of like all hands on deck team aspect of.
I'd say it's similar at BitSpace.
Yeah. So I really like that. So I'm already sort of, I don't know, personality wise or whatever, drawn to that idea of like wearing a lot of different hats, as opposed to being like very specialized into one thing. So I was comfortable with that idea. And then, but something that I'm not very good at is working all day at a 9-to-5 job, going home and working more.
Right, because you don't want to like devote your life to working on someone else's stuff. You also want to have time for your own things.
Totally. And I have a lot of hobbies and stuff, and I don't know. I find it very hard to do the same thing that I've done all day again at home. Mm-hmm. But so what happened is at ZenFry, eventually I got laid off, and I sort of decided to see it as like a blessing in disguise, and say like, well, I've been led down this road of opportunity sort of, and learning and growth with low risk. What if I just take 4 months and try to release something on Steam and just see if I can pay the rent for those 4 months?
Interesting.
Yeah. And if I can do that, then I can do that again, right? Right. I
like the disciplined approach. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to do this big company and I'm going to have all my friends do all this stuff. It's like, I'm going to try and do this thing once and see if I can do it again.
Yes.
See if I can do it again.
Yeah.
And really, maybe that's all you're ever doing, is just trying to repeat that process as many times as you can until it comes to an end.
Well, because if I can pay the rent, then it's a sustainable decision, right? Mm-hmm. Well, at least in the short term, right?
Right.
But so, yeah. So I worked for 4 months on my first game. It's called Militia, and it's a single-player strategy game. And it's got a part of the idea of BrainGoodGames is that it's procedurally generated content. Mm-hmm. So the levels are generate themselves infinitely, and then the difficulty scales based on how you do. So if you play really well, it gets harder, and if you play poorly, it gets easier. Mm-hmm. But what that means is that I, as a developer, don't have to churn out a bunch of content to provide to the players, which saves a whole lot of development time, right? Mm-hmm. Plus, I have like a very minimalist aesthetic for the games, which helps again, right? And I used a lot of assets from online and stuff like this. So basically, part of the I like minimalist things anyway, just aesthetically. So, but the aesthetic of the games and the game design core idea of BrainGoodGames was helping make it a feasible scope for the project. So yeah, I took 4 months doing that, and went through at that time it was not quite as grueling a greenlight process as Mark had, but it was still like you had to get a lot of votes. I don't really remember how many votes Militia ended up getting, but I was like doing all this stuff, like posting on Reddit and just anything I could think of to anywhere I could try to find people to give a green light vote or whatever. And nowadays on Reddit, that sort of thing is like super frowned upon.
Right.
But at the time, it was like you could sort of poke around and like get to know a mod or something.
I posted just a reference to my game or a video that I had made with a bunch of friends on a Scrabble subreddit.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's all negative comments, but it's just like, there's maybe the one person that says like, oh, like
self-promotion.
Self-promotion is like taboo.
Yeah, it is.
For some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is maybe a tangent, but Reddit, like, to me, it sort of seems like, and I'm biased because I'd like to promote myself on Reddit, but it seems to me like the voting system is designed to like take care of that sort of thing. Like, if people don't like your post, then they'll downvote it, right? So I don't know that you also need rules against self-promotion, right? Like, if it's self-promotion of something that people like, that's good. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's good content. Just because it's mine doesn't mean it's not a good thing. I don't know if that makes sense. But
yeah.
Anyway.
But to jump back, so you were working, what was Militia was the first game you had made? Was that something that you worked on your own?
Yes. Yeah, that was.
So you had done the art, the music, and
so the music, I got free music online. There's lots of stuff like that. Like, it would be hard to be like a musician wanting to work in games, I think, because there's just a lot of, or an artist for that matter. Just because there's a lot of stuff available.
Right.
So you have to be working on a project where there's something very unique about the musical needs or the artistic needs or something, so that you have to generate new assets and you can't just use things that were already produced. But anyway,
I had another question actually about the greenlight process. Were you able to navigate that based on the relationship or the work that you had done with
Zenfra?
What was his name again?
Zenfra?
The guy from Zenfra?
Corey?
Mark. Yeah. Mark. Was that a result of kind of that relationship with him that you had learned how to navigate that? Because it seems like you could be easily dissuaded from, being successful there.
Well, marketing and promotion is definitely not my strongest suit as an indie dev. So that's something I've always done because it has to be done. Mm-hmm. But it's not something that I'm particularly great at, and it's not something that I'm particularly interested in. Mm-hmm. But I think Mark gave me some tips about how to, where he had done some promotion, websites that where it was kosher to post about your thing or whatever, I don't know.
Is it more accurate to say that you had navigated that mostly on trial and error and just kind of
even to this day, I don't know. I haven't cracked that code.
Okay.
But I'm better at it than I was. Right. But it's that's a whole career you can have is just doing marketing and promotion.
Okay.
There's a huge skill set to that in terms of coming off as genuine and being in the right places and building relationships, and there's tons of stuff there to do.
So what was the result of your first game, Militia, that you had put on Steam?
Yeah.
Was it received well? Did you have a good kind of outcome there? Or?
Yeah, so I was blown away. I think probably within 2 months of release. Mm-hmm. It's hard to remember now. It's been several years, but I think within a couple months of release, I'd paid for the 4 months of development time, and the reviews were really positive. They were at the time something 95 plus or something like that, and they still are around there. I should mention that it's coming back to me now. So before I even released Militia on Steam, I released it on Android and got a lot of feedback from the community there. Okay. And I released it for free because I was sort of in the boom of freemium games on Android or whatever. So I had this thing where they could pay. It had ads, but you could pay to remove the ads because I thought that was like the thing.
Yeah.
But and that made like no money at all.
You learn from that.
Yeah. Especially the ad thing. Like for ads, at least at the time, you needed like heavy volume. You needed to be like Clash of Clans or like Bejeweled or whatever.
But just in terms of throwing ads at you?
Like in terms of players. Like you need like a ton of eyeballs for the ads to add up. No pun intended. But but I got a lot of feedback because I think on Android and on mobile in general, users tend to be more towards the non-entrenched gamer side, more so like less willing to put up with like confusing rules or unintuitive interface or whatever. It's like as soon as something is confusing or
they're out,
it's like forget this. Like I can just go play something else. Like, whereas on Steam or on PC and computer, you have a little bit more time. But the good part about that is that the people on Android really it's kind of like a crucible. Like I had to polish those sorts of things away on Android for people to even play it. Like the user interface problems and communication problems and tutorial, like all the on-ramp type stuff got much more polished when it was on Android because it had to be. And I think that helped when I released on Steam. Because if I had released it on Steam first, I think it would have been a lot more rough to begin with. And I might not have had the same fortune that I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you translate that into the next project? Were you like kind of like, I mean, obviously not, but like this is kind of it, or what was going through your head, or like, oh, this is successful, I'm going to keep making a game, I'm going to translate this into a studio, because you mentioned you liked working with indie studios. Did you
totally
at that point consider maybe you could make like a company with like more people?
Yeah, you're bang on the money. So after Militia, the plan was that if I could pay for the rent, that I would try to do this again, like replicate the success and keep a company going or whatever. Mm-hmm. And also, like you're saying, like I thought it'd be cool to work with somebody else. So I started working with one of my friends that I've known from like elementary school or whatever, who's also like into board games and played board games with a lot. And we collaborated on the design for the second game, which is called Axes and Acres. And that also took, I think it was maybe a little bit longer, maybe 5 months or 5 or 6 months or something like that. But it was actually much more financially successful than Militia on Steam. And
a positive trend.
Yeah, and that was great. So that it was like, okay, like this is working. Like whatever's happening here, like I've stumbled into the right place at the right time. I've gotten lucky, and maybe I can keep doing this. That's where I went from there. Is like seeing if I could also support another person working on the games too.
Seems like there's an element of that would be like a bit stressful, because like someone's maybe, I don't know if this your partner or your coworker or however you want to phrase it was dependent on the like kind of revenue. Is that
no?
How do you kind of take that in?
Yeah, so at the time, he was in a situation where he didn't need the money. Like he didn't have like whatever. Without getting into a ton of personal stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the type of thing where he was supporting a family at that time and needed like revenue to pay his rent and his mortgage and that sort of thing.
Like a salary kind of.
Right, exactly. Like where if the company went under, then I would be having a detrimental effect on him. Yeah. So it wasn't really like that, which was good. But yeah, like it's definitely made a lot of mistakes in terms of like working with a friend.
That was another question I had in the back of my mind.
There's a lot of lessons that were learned during that process that are sort of in hindsight seem obvious, but at the time it wasn't.
It's like that boiling frog kind of thing.
Yeah, it is like that. Yeah, it's like there's slow rifts.
Yeah.
And then,
So what did you learn from that experience?
Well, we had we negotiated everything up front verbally.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think we wrote it down too. But the main problem or the main advice that I would give to somebody who's considering doing that kind of thing is, like, because I wasn't really hiring him. We were sort of collaborating on this project, right? So if you're going to do that, if you're going to collaborate on a project, I would, with somebody, and you're expecting there to be a financial aspect to it. Because if there's no financial thing, then it's fine. Like, whatever.
It's just a game jam.
It's okay, yeah, no problem. But if there's going to be a financial aspect to it, I would recommend having the understanding be that you're working together for a project and not necessarily into the future, and spelling out in a contract how that relationship for that project ends. So not just what the revenue split is up front, but what does it look like in 5 years or something? Are you still financially coupled in some way, or like you just have to think about that sort of thing? Like, where does it go?
It seems like that's something that's easy to overlook when you're like, you want to make games and you have an opportunity and you're just like, oh, let's get my friend to do this and another friend to do that, and you kind of maybe don't give as much attention to the like discipline aspects of a business that you need to.
Yeah, well, and we even got through the part where we openly talked about like responsibility delegation and like revenue split and that kind of thing. So we got that far, but I would caution that it's good to know how these things wrap up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Ahead of time.
So you continue making these same style of games. What did that lead into? Kind of more of the same kind of projects? Yeah,
so the third project is called Skyboats, and this business partner and I worked together, and we decided that we wanted to like kind of up the graphical and musical game a little bit and try to like appeal more aesthetically and see if that resulted in growth.
Branch off a little bit, but like still stay true to like what's been successful for you.
Right. So the same like core, interesting decision making, strategy gameplay, with the single player ladder and all that, but pumping up the aesthetics a little bit. So we decided to hire an artist and a musician to work on that. That was actually Julian. Yeah, totally.
I knew that.
Yep. And so he did the music for that. But it was sort of an extension of the rifts that were forming in Axes and Acres. Okay. So now, like, I felt like I was spending more time managing like a team of people.
It's interesting how that can change.
Yeah. Whereas what I got into it for was game design primarily, and then secondarily like programming and game development. And so then I was doing like management, game development, and then like third game design. So it was kind of like the wrong mix. It was like not what I was trying to do.
So you intentionally shifted the focus.
Right. And then also like we did a Kickstarter for Skyboats 2. And so that's a whole other layer of like stress and another job, basically, that isn't a job that I'm interested in.
You have like a whole fulfillment like role.
Yeah, and just like getting the page together and all the marketing for that, and it's like it's stressful because it's like time limited. It's like there's like a success and a failure case and all this. Right. So anyway, Skyboats, the third project, was by far the most stressful of the three, and it like I just wasn't really having a lot of fun making games at that point. And it's like, well, if I'm going to take on all the risk of being an independent game developer, I should at least like have fun doing it, right?
Right. If you're going to go down doing something you enjoy.
Right. So with the fourth game, Minos Strategos, and all the subsequent games, I'm back working again solo. And so there's 7 now. 7 BrainGoodGames since 2015. And
what's the latest one?
The latest one is actually a sequel. It's Militia 2. So the first game was Militia, and this is Militia 2. And it's aesthetically similar, and the core gameplay is similar. It's sort of like an expansion set for a board game or something. It's like the the content was swapped out, but like the soul of it is the same. And then at the same time, like I went back and like polished all the things in Militia with all like game design lessons that I've learned over the 6 or 7 years or whatever it's been. So it's just a much more like approachable, clean, I don't know, better design.
So what like taking into consideration like everything you've learned, and potentially your younger self when you're trying to get into that, like what advice would you give for, because there's so many people that want to pursue that, and you have like it seems like pretty good experience in terms of taking that journey.
I've been extremely fortunate.
How do you what kind of things did you learn along the road?
Sure. Well, I can talk a little bit about like the advantages, like where I've had advantages, I guess, that have helped. So first thing is that the core concept of BrainGoodGames with the procedurally generated content and the dynamic difficulty sort of lends itself to having small scope, because I only have to design the core system of the game and then program the core rules and everything, and then it's done. Like after I do like tutorials and all there's still a lot of more stuff to bring a game to market, right? Yeah. But it's less than if I had to design every shrub or whatever in the game or make all the assets or whatever. So that's a really, like, people often talk about how you have to keep your scope manageable, right? Yeah. But if you want to release like a product on Steam or something, you also have to be delivering something that gives either like a very intense, very unique short-term experience or something that provides like lasting value for people, right? So this is a way for like my game, the way that BrainGoodGames are structured is a way for people to get lasting value out of them without me having to churn out a whole bunch of content. So I'm able to keep scope down, right? And then the second thing is that I think another part of that's overlooked is that to have a sustainable business,
because it is a business,
in life or for your life or whatever, or to pursue your passion rather than like taking a more consistent, stable income, right? I think one of the keys is there's two parts of the equation, right? There's the income part, and then there's the expenses part of your life, right? So you have to also like manage that second part, right? Which is something that I've worked hard on as well, like making sure that in my life I've structured my expenses in such a way that I don't have to have a breakout hit every single game in order to pay the rent and pay for my.
And that's like a discipline thing. It seems like to me.
Yeah, well, I kind of like I've always been interested in like, well, it sort of comes through in the games too. Actually, like BrainGoodGames have like a minimalist aesthetic. Like I always like to see what the core of things is, like just because of my personality or whatever. Like I want to boil things down and see like if you take everything out, what's left, like what's that core, right? So it's the same in like expenses or like spending for me. Like I'm interested in knowing like what are the things that deliver the most value for your money in life, like in terms of like happiness or whatever. And like what does the core of that look like? Like what can you get away with doing there? You know, like a minimalist like life approach. And like I'm nowhere close to that kind of thing, but I do like
you're learning,
investigating it. You know, like I like exploring minimalism, so that's like helped me manage that part of the equation.
And in terms of like, obviously you have your own priorities in terms of like a team, but like if people wanted to like pursue that as an endeavor, if you were to summarize some of the most important things that they should keep in mind when pursuing that.
Being an independent game developer?
Yeah, in like a team dynamic in particular.
The team thing, maybe I'm not the best person to talk to about that because I did a team for like a little bit and then went back to solo. But I would say the main thing is that I think, especially if you're going to work with a friend or something, which I think is common in like indie type scenarios. Yeah, just to know, both be aware, everybody should be aware of what the time scope of the thing is. Like, how long are you doing this for, and what does it look like when it's over?
Have you ever considered branching out, making something non-traditional compared to like what you've been making? So like,
totally. I've always really liked, like I said, I was like big into the Super Nintendo, but so I've always really liked sports games in a funny way. So like I used to play NHL 95 a lot, and actually I still play it.
Is that what console is that?
It's Super Nintendo.
Okay.
So I used to play that with my brother all the time. And,
I think I'm vaguely familiar. If I've seen it, I'd be like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, or like ice hockey on the Nintendo is really good.
Okay, I know.
Or Tecmo Bowl is really good.
Tecmo Bowl, I love that one, and I hate sports games.
Yeah, yeah. So what I really like about those three in particular is that like sort of similar to what we were talking about before. They're boiling down like what hockey is or like what football is into like really basic like run or pass or like a long pass or a long run or whatever.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's sort of like abstracting a lot of the game out, but keeping like the core of like what the sport is, right? Mm-hmm. So I've fiddled around with a bunch of prototypes for like sports games in Unity or whatever, and I don't know, like who knows if I'll finish one of them someday. Like I think that like my skill set and intuitions as a game designer like sort of lend itself to a turn-based strategy game type of design, but I'd love to make like a sports game, like release one of these like action sports games at some point. Yeah.
Is there any kind of games that influence your game design process?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, when I was working at Zenfry, or maybe a little bit before that, I got really into the designer board game scene. So like games like one of the first ones was Settlers of Catan, and there's like Carcassonne, and I don't know. There's Dominion, and a whole whack of these games, right?
Okay.
And there's strategy board games that, are like low conflict, but have like a deep strategic experience and with very simple rules, which is something that appeals to me. So, but they're all multiplayer. So, that's part of the impetus of the company is like, I've always been really interested in the design of like these games and how they work and how like, one thing that's really cool about board games is, all the players that are playing have to know the rules to play. Whereas in a video game, you don't have to know all the rules. You can just move the controls and kind of learn it out as you go, right? So that's like a very tight design constraint for a game because you have to have very few rules for every player to know them all, right? Mm-hmm. So it has to be a simple game. You have to really boil things down. But I really like that because if there's a designer that I really like called Keith Burgun, and he does single-player video games, among other things. He's a strategy game design theorist. But one of his things that he talked about is if you're playing like Civilization or some strategy game or like Crusader Kings 2 or whatever, and there's an AI that's going to make moves, right? Like you make your moves and then the AI makes moves. If you don't know how the AI works, like how it makes decisions and what moves it might use, that's just like a black box, and you can't make decisions based on what they're going to do then, right? It's just, to you, it's just randomness. Like, you don't understand how it works, so you can't, like, build it into your mental model of the game. So, something that I really like about board games is that's not something that board games really lend themselves to. Like, the player has to know the rules in order to play, right? So that's like one of the aesthetic choices that I do in BrainGoodGames is like the rules are simple enough and easy to learn enough and memorizable enough or whatever that you can know them all. So I guess your question was about like design influences or whatever. So board games are like a big design influence. And Keith Burgun has a game called Oro that's from a few years ago, which is a single player strategy game. And that's where I got the idea for the single player ladder so combining the procedural content with the...
Can you describe like single player ladder?
Yeah. So like if you're playing StarCraft or whatever online, or Dota or League or whatever, it's trying to get a match where you have a 50-50 win rate with your opponent, right? Okay. And that's what like ELO is for, right? So if you... or MMR or whatever. So if you lose MMR, and then you'll get matched up with lower opponents, right? Lower skilled opponents. So the idea is that every time you play, you're getting like an appropriate challenge, right? Which is good for like maximizing. There's like this. There's a game design, or he's just a philosopher, I think. He talks about like flow state, where you're halfway between like not understanding something at all and completely having mastered it.
Okay.
And if you're in that zone, you get in a flow state and you're like
cool.
feeling good and like totally engaged in something. And you can like the world kind of melts around you and you're totally engaged in the thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this matchmaking is for. Plus, it's not that fun for somebody to get stomped or just to stomp somebody, right?
Right.
But so the idea in Oro is that you could take that same concept of we want to be maximally engaged with having like an appropriate challenge and just have it in single player. So if you win, the game gets harder. And if you lose, the game gets easier. And so therefore, you're going to stay more often in this optimal challenge zone or whatever. So yeah, this game Oro is where I got the idea for that single player ladder coupled with the procedural content, which kind of like wow, and that's the whole idea.
Do you follow the like board game scene in Winnipeg in terms of like people that are making?
No, not really.
I think there's this. I was hoping that you were familiar. There's this game. I think it's called Climate Change. They had recently announced a board game at Across the Board.
Cool.
I was hoping that you knew a little bit about that.
I've been to Across the Board a bunch of times, and it's awesome. And we have like a big board game collection at home.
Have you ever thought about making your own board game? Because it seems like everything that you like enjoy is kind of within board games. So it seems like natural progression to maybe also explore. You know, maybe you don't want to do Kickstarter again, but...
Well, yeah, that's sort of the thing. So
maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah, well, not really. But, yeah, so that's the thing is, like, I've sort of found a way to make making and releasing games on Steam financially viable, right?
Okay.
And I kind of get my game design kicks out doing that, right? So if I was going to make a board game, I'd have to figure that process out again. Or just do it as a hobby. Right? Whereas, like, I'm not expecting a financial return or whatever. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. Like, that sort of gets back to the thing that we were talking about earlier where I find it hard to work at something all day and then do the same thing in my time off or whatever. So I'm going to work and make a Steam game during the day and do all the game design and game development then, and then make a hobby game at night. Like, it's, you know... So that's sort of where I'm at with the board game thing, is like how I'd have to find a way to make it financially viable. Mm-hmm. But having said that, it is something that I probably do want to do at some point just for like the kick of it or whatever. But yeah, I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Yeah. So you talk about like balancing like game design as like kind of the full-time thing with maybe things that aren't that. So what kind of like things do you like to supplement game design with that are like different and they feel like a different itch, or it's like a different hobby altogether?
Like at work or
just in general, just like, in terms of like your hobbies and
So
what do you supplement game design with?
Lots of stuff. So like I play Ultimate Frisbee in the summer.
Okay. Do you play in a league?
In mods, yeah. Yep.
Did we play each other?
Maybe.
Oh my gosh, and I just like...
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy that. I've been doing that for years. And just for a few years, I've started playing sponge hockey in the winters. Okay. And I haven't played hockey since I was 18, but just recently I got back into playing hockey.
Ice hockey?
Yep.
Cool.
So, yeah, I really like sports.
Is that an elite? Is ice hockey an elite? Are you playing elite?
Yeah, ASHL. Yep.
Are we like crossing paths like all the time and I just don't see?
Yeah, well, we'll know this now.
What team do you play on?
They're called the Park City Heroes.
Division?
4E or...
Oh, so like low?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think we're pretty low too. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. You know what would be the funniest thing in the world is if like I was like being a brute one game and you're just like, oh, that fucking asshole, and then here we are just like hamming it up, you know?
Totally.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really love music. I play guitar, and I love going to concerts and that sort of thing. And yeah.
Sorry, I need to think about this one.
Got a fantastic dog, Juno.
Oh, actually, I do want to talk about that, but before we get to that, because I do want to ask you about that, because I feel like I have a bit of a shared experience in terms of like a new having pets. Yeah. But just before we segue to that, I was hoping that you could kind of share your experience, jumping back a bit on the Kickstarter process.
Yeah. It's very stressful and hard, and Kickstarter is super weird because, like, whether you're going to sell a game on Steam or itch or Android or iOS or whatever on like a traditional marketplace, or you're going to Kickstart it and sell it there, regardless, you still have to promote it somewhere and find like eyeballs and find like interested people, right? So the point of doing Kickstarter, at least for like a digitally distributed video game, is that you think that Kickstarter is going to give you more views or whatever.
So it's like a marketing tool, kind of.
Exactly. Because if you could get eyeballs to go to your Steam page and buy the game, that would be the same as them going to your Kickstarter and buying the game, right? Sort of presupposing that you're not a big studio that has to fund the development time, right? Like, I'm a one-man studio, and like, I don't have to fund the upfront development time. So the Kickstarter isn't actually like for what Kickstarter is like
traditionally used
for. It's more of like a marketing tool, right? Yeah. So I've found that personally, for digital games, it doesn't make sense for me to devote, because it feels like I'm sending this traffic to this other website,
right?
In the hopes that they're going to give me more traffic from their users or whatever. They're on the front page or something. But, like, I think you'd have to be a pretty big Kickstarter for that to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I'm not really super well-versed on, like, Kickstarter's ranking algorithms or whatever. So I don't know how worth it would be, or if they've changed it recently, or who knows. But in terms of, like... So if I was going to make a board game, though, with a board game, you have to print the copies up front before you get to ship them to people, right? So that's something where you need, like, capital to, like, make the copies, and then maybe you can make a margin on it and sell them down the line or whatever. So that makes a lot more sense, like, from a practical standpoint, right?
Right.
That'd be something maybe I'd do in the future. But, yeah, so, like, having said that, my overall point is that regardless of whether you do, like, a Kickstarter or you do, like, a more traditional storefront sales model, you still have to get the eyeballs from somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So all the effort you're doing to get those eyeballs is the same regardless, right? So it's not like Kickstarter is, like, propelling you or whatever, unless you get to the front page of Kickstarter or something like that, right? Which would be great. But, you know, I haven't figured out how to do that. That's kind of like the $1 million question, right?
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier before we were recording, before we segued. I was like running a bit behind because I got a new cat, and it's the greatest thing ever, and it's also stressful at the same time. You have a dog, Juno?
Yeah, we just bought a dog. I guess 3.5 months ago or so. So she's 6 months old, and she's a rescue from one of the reserves.
Oh, nice.
Red Sucker Lake, and apparently she was hanging around the nursing station up there, and they found her, and. We did like a ton of dog shopping leading up to it, and saw like, I don't know, 40 dogs or something like this before we picked one. But as soon as we saw her, it was like...
What does that mean to you, like that kind of, like the relationship? And maybe this is a loaded awesome. Kind of like...
Well, I've always had dogs growing up, and I don't know. They're just... there's something about the unconditional excitement that's really nice about a dog. Like, where they're always happy to see you, regardless of anything else that's going on. And that's just a nice rock to have, like something to have back in your corner, right? And, another thing I like about dogs is that this is more of a nerdy take than, like, a feels take. But, like, dogs, they say that dogs are the only animal that humans are like co-evolved with because we've like domesticated them for so long. So dogs are actually like evolved to be pleasing to us and to like understand us, like human emotions, like facial. Yeah. They've done studies about like dogs recognizing human facial emotions and stuff. And I certainly feel like I can read dog emotions too. Whereas like with other animals, it's kind of a lot more opaque or whatever. Like there's more of a distance, like an animal, like more like an animal, right? So I don't know. I've always just really dug dogs. Yeah, it's been really fun learning how to like train her too. Like I've always had really small dogs growing up, like tiny, like little lap dogs or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, and with little dogs, you can kind of get away with not training them because what's the worst they can do?
Right.
But so Juno's like actually like a medium-sized dog. Like she's just a mutt crossed with who knows what from the north, right? So we've been like on YouTube constantly and like cross-referencing all these like dog
I feel
training
like
videos.
I'm in that phase right now too.
Trying to get
totally
like
relates.
yeah. So that's been really cool. Like learning how to train her or whatever, and yeah, that's really rewarding too.
I feel like that things like that are important or good for balancing like your mental health, like like putting yourself outside yourself and caring for something that kind of relies on you. There's something about that is, I think, healthy for you.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. Something about like taking on the responsibility or yeah. But because
it'd be easier for me to not have any cat, or just to have one, and I got another one, and it's pretty stressful. But like, I understand that I will come out the other end being able to provide a safe, loving environment for a cat that otherwise may not have had that opportunity. So to me, that's like, in a selfish way, that's rewarding for me that I'm getting that out of that. Yeah,
it's like a sense of purpose. Yeah. Like it's something that you can feel like you've accomplished, or it's rewarding, right? It's really cool.
One thing that you wrote in writing that I wanted to get more of your understanding of, or your perspective of, is you said something that was important to you was finding common ground between different worldviews.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that you'd be able to elaborate on that.
Sure. So I mean, I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that, especially like politically, but in terms of a lot of people's opinions on a lot of different issues, it feels like there's a lot more. To me, I'll speak from my personal experience.
Right.
It feels a lot like there's a lot more, what would you say, harsh language, condemnation of people, writing people off as like irredeemable or evil or whatever.
We were kind of talking about this, so we won't go into detail, but
yeah. So like, but I've always felt that it's important to recognize, like, have some humility and recognize that just because something seems very obvious to me, or I believe something very strongly and with conviction, or something aligns with my values really strongly, doesn't mean that is the same for everyone else. And sort of, I find that it's important to give everyone the benefit of the doubt when we're talking about things that we don't agree about. Partially because I don't think it's a good... I think if we all kind of move apart into our own silos and only talk to people we agree with, then we lose a lot of wisdom of like breadth of experience and knowledge. And also because I don't think anybody becomes convinced by being like ostracized or like demonized or whatever. I don't think that's ever convinced anybody.
Where do you think you picked up that philosophy?
I think that's like a personality trait, probably. I don't think I could take a lot of credit for that. It's like I'm just disposed to being diplomatic, I guess.
Okay.
I just want to find like, I'm interested in finding where people agree, especially when it seems like there's obviously no way that like they're diametrically opposed on everything or whatever.
Right.
But yeah. And so, I think that like polarization, like culturally or whatever, I think that has a lot to do with the internet. And lots has been said on this by people way smarter and more knowledgeable about it than me. But like it's become possible more recently to find a niche for anything. So whatever view you have about anything, you can go on the internet and find people that agree with you, right?
Yep.
And it's a lot easier to be in a space with people that you agree with because you don't have to be challenged on your views. Whereas, like, before, if the media was, like, 3 channels on TV or whatever, you could go to, like, this news channel or this news channel or this one. Like, you could only go so far into a silo of, like, people that agree with you exactly. Like, you'd still have to be confronted with views that don't totally jive with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the internet lets people go apart and just have that echo chamber effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I think that's having an unhealthy effect on not only like politics and like political debate and the way people talk about politics and stuff, but it sort of just has a distancing, demonizing effect on people, like interpersonal relationships. Yeah. And so then, like, paradoxically, like, we're more connected on the internet, but then we can feel, like, more lonely because it feels like people don't agree with us on certain things, and therefore, like, they're just different and other, and we don't have to think about them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would agree with that.
Yeah. So I don't think that's, like, a good idea at all. We need to, like, not do that. So I'm a big, like, reach across the aisle guy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of like the most important things that you've learned, whether it's through game design or the board games or the philosophy or the reading? And you also mentioned, or maybe it was in writing, that you like to read. But so, what are the most important things that you've learned through a bunch of these things?
Sure, that's a big question.
Yep.
I'll do my best.
It's a bit of a loaded question.
Yeah. Sort of one thing is that we were talking about the pets and adopting responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think that's like responsibility and purpose and like voluntarily taking on hard tasks, especially ones that you think are valuable or like contribute to something that you find valuable, is very important for people for your well-being or happiness or whatever. I think that's like an important thing in life. It's important to do hard things because they're hard.
I use that all the time, but I always fuck it up in terms of like how I say it. I say, oh, do things because they're hard, not because... Wait, hold on a second. Yeah, but essentially the way you said it, I very strongly subscribe to that, or at least I try to.
Especially if you can find something that you find valuable or whatever, like you think is worthwhile, and if you do something hard to contribute to that, that's where you're gonna feel good. What other big life things?
I have another question for you. Sure. Actually, it's maybe no less difficult.
Okay.
But so if you were to look back on your life, let's say you arrive at the theoretical, hypothetical, whatever your perspective is,
sure,
at the pearly gates,
sure,
what would you like to have been said about your life?
I'd like it to have been said that that I tried to find common ground between people.
Okay.
And that I really loved games and entertaining people, and trying to help people get the most out of whatever they're trying to do.
Awesome. Unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So in closing, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can do that? Whether it's through your company, your games,
sure,
or personal accounts.
Yeah. So for BrainGoodGames, the website is BrainGoodGames BrainGoodGames.com. There's no app. And my Twitter is BrickRoadDX. And but yeah, everything's listed on BrainGoodGames.com, so you can get a hold of me there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I really was looking forward to this conversation because I think you've been working pretty diligently in the industry and successful in kind of what you're doing. So I've always think that's really cool when people can pursue the thing that they're passionate about and support themselves doing so. And it's unfortunate because there's a bunch of other things that I want to get into, and I find I have this problem with most of the people I talk to. You could just talk forever and ever and ever,
Yeah.
but at some point you kind of have to kind of bring it to full circle. But
Sure.
the nice thing is maybe down the road we can have another conversation, whether it's on recording or not.
Love to.
Yeah, so it was nice to finally meet you. So I had known about you for a while, but I think
Absolutely, likewise.
I just kind of threw it on you. I was like, "Hey, can you pick me up at my house and then drive me to the apartment?" So I kind of put that on you a little bit. So maybe that was like a little bit too much at the beginning, but like I don't know. It's just kind of like we're just kind of people doing stuff. I don't know.
Everything worked out great.
Right. Yeah. So other than that, I want to thank everyone for listening. Again, if you want to support this kind of initiative and these conversations and you enjoy what you've been hearing, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Interactive Indies. As well, again, if you go to interactiveindie.com, we'll have links to pretty much every platform, to the YouTube. You can listen to all the conversations. I really encourage you to learn more about everyone in our community. And, thanks to Dan from BitSpace Development. We're recording in his office, and some of the equipment is thanks to his generosity. As well, Daniel Bergman was involved in the podcast when I really had nothing to offer. So I will always be grateful for his support. And so many people have volunteered to help me with different things and contribute. And it's nice that it turns into this thing that we're kind of all doing for each other. And we're getting to know our community and turn it more into kind of like a tight-knit community and like a family.
That's
it's
awesome.
cheesy, but yeah, so thanks again for your time.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for having me on.